Welcome to the Surviving to Thriving podcast, where we're dedicated to helping you break free from chronic inflammation and get your life back. I'm Dr. Rachel Yeager, naturopathic doctor and medical intuitive, and the founder of the Surviving to Thriving method of chronic illness recovery. Join me as we uncover strategies for overcoming health challenges and restoring your physical, mental, emotional, and soul health. Together, let's embark on a journey to thriving. Hello, welcome. If you're listening, I hope you're having a great day. Today, we are going to dive into a topic that is both trendy and timeless. We're going to be talking about hidden inflammation and how it could be the root cause of your chronic health struggles. If you've ever wondered what are signs of inflammation in your body, can you have inflammation without swelling or even without an infection? And what does inflammation look like? Then this episode is for you. And before we jump in, let me just share a little bit of my own journey. So when I was way back in middle school, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, which is basically an inflammatory disease where the immune system attacks healthy cells. I had persistent fatigue, joint pain, digestive stress, brain fog, countless doctor visits and lab tests, procedures, studies, and I was told everything was normal and that it was just, there was nothing else going on besides Crohn's disease, just existed in a vacuum by itself. There was nothing else I could do. And it wasn't until I started studying the causes of chronic inflammation that I realized inflammation was the missing piece to my healing puzzle. So let's dive into understanding inflammation, because we talk about inflammation, but we don't talk about what it actually is and why it happens. So inflammation is a natural defense mechanism. It's your body's way of protecting itself. The classic signs of inflammation that we're taught in med school are things like redness, heat, swelling, and pain. We call these the cardinal signs of inflammation. But here's where things get tricky and why conventional medicine misses most cases of inflammation. Not all inflammation is obvious. You can have inflammation without having these cardinal signs like swelling and even without having an infection. So chronic low-grade inflammation flies under the radar. It wreaks havoc on our mood, energy, metabolism, and immune system without you even realizing it. So what are the signs of inflammation that most people miss? Here are 10 sneaky signs of hidden inflammation symptoms that I actually think are more common than the cardinal signs. 1, persistent fatigue. If you feel constantly drained, even after a full night's sleep, systemic inflammation might be at play. 2, mood disorders, anxiety, depression, and brain fog. These can all stem from inflammatory cytokines that are affecting brain function. Side note on this, I have actually seen quite a few cases of bipolar disorder and other diagnosed mood disorders reversed when the inflammation is actually treated. Sleep disturbances, struggling to fall asleep, waking up frequently, or never feeling rested. Chronic inflammation, it interferes with melatonin production. It also interferes with cortisol, which is involved in our circadian rhythm, and sleep plays a huge role in sleep disturbance, and it also inflames our brain. So we can't make all the cascade of hormones that help us fall asleep. Digestive issues, bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, or new food sensitivities can all be signs of gut inflammation. 5, skin problems. Eczema, acne, rosacea, even unexplained rashes can be external indicators of systemic inflammation. And here are 5 more signs most people don't realize are linked to inflammation. Frequent headaches or migraines. Inflammatory processes in the brain and nervous system can trigger recurring headaches. We know a lot of times migraine is because of vasospasm. Blood vessels are spasming. Guess what usually causes that? Inflammation. Number 7, morning joint stiffness. So if you wake up achy and stiff, but you feel better after moving around, low-grade inflammation is likely contributing. Alternatively, If you have stiffness that happens after you've been moving all day and your pain is worse after you've been moving, that's just a different type of inflammation. That is actually still usually an inflammatory cause. Brain fog and forgetfulness, trouble focusing or remembering things, or feeling really mentally sluggish. Inflammation, it really impacts cognitive function more than you'd think. And a certain type of inflammation, histamine, is known for making you feel like you're in a dreamlike state. Like you're just walking through the world, just not even fully present and aware of your surroundings as though life weren't real. Number 9, unexplained weight gain or difficulty losing weight. Chronic inflammation disrupts hormone imbalance and metabolism, making it harder to shed any pounds. You could be walking every single day. You could be eating the world's most perfect diet. It doesn't matter. The way inflammation affects our brain, it actually disrupts that hormone signaling, causes leptin resistance, and it's pretty hard to lose weight if you're not addressing inflammation first. Fun fact is GLP-1s, which are really popular right now, Ozempic is one of them. We actually know that these help lower inflammation. So I think that's one of the reasons they work so well is because they're not just changing the hormone signaling, they're actually addressing some of the inflammation that prevents weight loss. And side note on this, if you have severe inflammation that's affecting gut or coming from other issues, sometimes you actually get weight loss instead of weight gain. Number 10, increased cravings for sugar and processed foods. Inflammation affects insulin sensitivity. And so we often get these cravings for quick energy sources like sugar and carbs because of the effects there. Inflammation can also come from an overgrowth of bugs like candida and other little pathogens that can overgrow. The candida fungus is pretty notorious for contributing to sugar cravings. So here's the catch 22 of inflammation and how this relates to your body being in a fight or flight state. So, chronic inflammation doesn't just cause symptoms, it actually traps your subconscious brain and therefore your body in a fight or flight state. So, when inflammation is present, your nervous system shifts into sympathetic mode, which is what we call fight or flight, making your body feel like it's under constant attack. This can cause racing thoughts and anxiety, shallow breathing or tightness in your chest, which we sometimes call air hunger, digestive shutdown. This can be bloating, indigestion, constipation, disrupted sleep, and sugar cravings, and so much more goes into fight or flight. Anxiety, feeling jumpy, having trouble sleeping. A lot of these you might notice overlap with the symptoms and signs of inflammation that we just went through. So here's the kicker. You cannot heal inflammation while stuck in fight or flight mode. Your body needs to shift into its resting state, being parasympathetic mode, which I like to call rest and heal. It's usually called rest and digest to activate the healing process. So we have to be in rest, digest, heal state in order to heal. Because when we are in fight or flight, our immune system actually shuts down and stops working. So, how do we shift into rest and heal mode? If you're dealing with signs of chronic inflammation systemically throughout the body, there are a couple ways you can help your body reset. Some people like breathing exercises. For some people, that actually activates their sympathetic system more. So, breathing is not the entry point. Some people like gentle movement, walking, stretching, yoga. That actually does help switch the nervous system into parasympathetic and really making sure that you are prioritizing your sleep. And the number one thing I like to talk to people about, and there's specific things you can do for this, but making sure you're turning off screens early so that you're honoring your body's circadian rhythm. All of these physical things actually help shift our brain state. So, what are some holistic approaches to reducing chronic inflammation? Once your body is starting to switch into rest and heal mode, it becomes easier to heal inflammation. But part of this catch 22 is while you're still having a ton of inflammation, it's pretty impossible to sink into your body and feel grounded and really pay attention to switching out of this fight or flight state. So I view it as a level up. You take one step up and then you can take another step up on the other side. You ratchet up on one side and you can ratchet up on the other side. So as you walk toward physical healing, it becomes a lot easier to walk toward brain state healing and nervous system regulation, which then enables you to take the next physical step, which then that next physical comfort step enables you to do more nervous system regulation and go deeper. So it's a balancing act. It's a feeding back and forth. It's not just a black and white jump to one or the other. Here are some of the root causes of chronic inflammation that are really helpful to tackle. Looking at different infections that can be present in the body is probably the most overlooked cause of chronic inflammation. Looking at different environmental exposures that can be contributing, such as mold exposure, that's probably tied there for the most common cause. And this feedback loop. So, stress really contributes to inflammation. Inflammation is our body's attempt to process and resolve what it perceives as a threat. We need inflammation to survive. If we had things coming in that we don't want in our body, and our firefighter immune cells did not sound the fire alarm of inflammation, then we'd be in big trouble. So we need an inflammation to mount an immune response to properly go after these things that need to be taken care of. The problem is when the alarm switch does not flip off and it just keeps going and going. And we stay in this stage one where our cells are like, danger. I'm going to stay in this response until the danger's passed. And for whatever reason, there can be a few different reasons, they don't get signaled to be switched to that next phase. Then they just stay in this stage one of just dumping inflammation chemicals, ongoing, ongoing, ongoing. So a lot of times we see inflammation rising up after things like COVID or the stress of a car accident or surgery or the loss of a loved one. It could be any infection that it comes up after. And the inflammation was meant to happen temporarily to help with the body's healing process. It was not meant to persist. So a lot of people think, oh, my inflammation started after COVID, so it must be that COVID is still in the body. And there is evidence that COVID proteins do hang out in the body. So that can be part of the picture. But the other part of the picture is, did a switch get flipped from the COVID? And at this point, your body is just carrying out this chronic inflammatory response, even though the initial trigger is actually gone. One thing that inflammation affects is our mitochondrial function. So it's just this entire catch-22 spiral, because once we have the chronic fire alarm going off for too long, so we're just flooded, we're absolutely bombarded with all these inflammatory chemicals, and they're not even working on anything in particular anymore. Once we have this flood of inflammation, it affects our mitochondria, which are the energy factories in our cell. If your energy factories stop working, your cells no longer have the energy units they need, the batteries, to power them to operate normally. So our cells stop signaling to other cells. They stop making hormones. They stop clearing out metabolic waste, which we need to detox all of the waste that builds up normally in our body and our cells. They stop doing so many things. They're not communicating with each other. Our cells have to be constantly communicating for us to have coherent functions happening in the body. And we can be running metabolic processes. We have to remember, we're just having, I don't even know how many biochemical reactions happening every second in our body. And so we have these little assembly line factories just working constantly in our body. If they are paused, or if they don't have enough power to get through a full cycle, are they just accumulating a bunch of nonsense junk in the middle of their cycle? So many things can go wrong when we have this chronic inflammation coming in, affecting our mitochondria, and it's also affecting the nervous system. It's causing damage potentially to organs. If we have inflammation burdening an organ like our liver, which is tasked with getting rid of our histamine and helping us detox all the metabolic waste and things that we need to move out, then we're going to have a lot more brain fog because our liver can't do its job properly. So once your body is able to start tackling these things, Usually with a root cause approach, we're removing whatever the trigger is. If it's still there, we are signaling to the cells and using very specific tools to shift them into the next stage so they can move on from that initial constant fire alarm inflammation stage. And then we're helping repair and rebalance and restore because inflammation has a lot of indirect effects. We get imbalanced hormones, we get nutrient deficiencies, we get our cortisol, which is our stress energy hormone, and our adrenal glands have a really hard time functioning. So we have to do all this cleanup and repair and restore. We talk about a lot about the gut being our terrain, but we need to think about our entire body. Inflammation even affects us to the skin level. So a lot of restoring comes in. There are some root causes that we can use certain methods to tackle. So sometimes an anti-inflammatory diet can be huge. Probably I won't say the number one because this isn't for everyone, but one of the top inflammatory diet components is processed seed oils. So unprocessed, cold pressed, expeller pressed, unrefined seed oils are pretty great for us. We need them to make our cells and they keep us healthy. Our body can use them as raw building materials to make the other oils that we need. A lot of people argue that seed oils, like the ones in nuts, seeds, and things that are being demonized a lot, are actually more important by far than taking omega-3 oils because we can use those seed oils and convert them to what we need. The problem is that all the seed oils that are being used commercially are processed. So this is like saying that something is bad for you and we're only studying its one processed form instead of looking at the natural form that we're supposed to be and taking it in. So something we really have to watch out for is checking labels for these things like sunflower and canola oils. And if they just list it as sunflower or canola, then that is a processed oil. They would have explicitly said if it was expeller or cold pressed. If it says expeller or cold pressed or organic, then it is going to be unprocessed, unrefined. It's going to be okay. It's going to actually have oils that are used for anti-inflammatory processes. So doing an anti-inflammatory diet where we avoid these processed oils, which are used to make most restaurant foods, they're most packaged foods, you'd be pretty shocked at everything that these are in. And also thinking about the pesticide components of what we're eating, thinking about if our body specifically has any sensitivities to things like gluten or dairy. It can be really important to help lower inflammation, at least even temporarily, with some diet changes. And then some diet changes we're going to want to maintain long term for optimal health. There are a lot of supplements and herbs that can be really helpful. So turmeric or curcumin is really helpful for shutting down that chronic inflammatory, just ongoing fire alarm of inflammation phase. Certain probiotics can actually help signal to turn off inflammation pathways. We have a lot of different herbs that signal our NRF2 anti-inflammatory pathway. So we can use things like coffee extract and green tea extract and specifically help target the pathways that we want. And different adaptogens. These are herbs that help support our adrenal glands. They also have a lot of anti-inflammatory properties. There's so many more. There's more than I could ever list in hours of talking. And it all depends on the unique presentation of what your body's fighting, how your body is presenting, and what the strategy is. What's the approach, given your entire synergistic, interconnected health picture and how your body responds to things. And if your body's really sensitive, then starting with very single ingredients. So sometimes instead of doing a whole perilla seed extract, we just want the luteolin from the perilla seed extracted. In the same way that quercetin is often available just by itself, that single constituent from plants. So being really strategic with that part. Balancing gut health, always going to help. A lot of people think we have to start with the gut. I actually think a lot of inflammation in the gut is a manifestation of systemic inflammation happening outside the gut, but plenty of inflammation does come from the gut itself. So using really specific things, not everyone can tolerate fiber and fermented foods, but what can we do to help support gut health? And the goal is to restore balance. where our gut houses so much of our immune system. It helps make our neurotransmitters. We need everything in our gut to be in balance so that we're making these brain chemicals, we're making these hormones, and our immune system is staying strong. Addressing hidden inflammatory triggers. So I mentioned a couple of these earlier, but things like chronic stress, environmental toxins, sometimes even food sensitivities can all fuel inflammation without obvious symptoms. Just a note on food sensitivities, most food sensitivities are a reaction to inflammation that was already there. The inflammation made the gut lining leaky. The cells were gapped and pulled apart because they were inflamed. They weren't nice and tight and just forming a nice tight wall together so that things can't get through. Once a protein that we eat gets through the gut lining into our bloodstream where it does not belong, then our body freaks out and says, whoa, this isn't supposed to be here. I'm going to start attacking it. And now it has made these warrior cells to attack this specific food protein. So every time we eat it, we're going to get that antibody response. So a lot of times food sensitivities are actually a reaction and not the cause. There are a few cases like gluten sensitivity where we have associated gluten sensitivity and continuing to eat it with actually increased autoimmune risk. So it's all about being really judicious in considering the whole context of your health when you're looking at food sensitivities and what to actually eliminate in order to have an anti-inflammatory diet. So final takeaway, is inflammation the root of your symptoms? If you resonated with any of these hidden warning signs of inflammation, then it's time to start listening to your body. Inflammation is not just redness and swelling. It's often silent and sneaky and disguised as everyday symptoms like fatigue and anxiety and brain fog. But once you start recognizing it, you can start healing the actual root cause and doing that on a physical level and paying attention to your brain state and whether you're living in a more fight or flight pattern or whether you're more in that rest and heal and digest state. Chronic inflammation is a really silent driver behind a lot of health struggles. Chronic inflammation is behind cancer and dementia and really big diagnoses like that. But the good news is you don't have to live in survival mode or in a chronic inflammation state. If you're wondering how to get to the root cause of your inflammation, definitely check out my website, drrachelyeager.com. I have personalized guidance, some resources on there. If this resonated for you, definitely feel free to share it with a friend. I think there's a lot of widespread inflammation in society. And until next time, listen to your body, take care of yourself, and keep moving from surviving to thriving. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Surviving to Thriving podcast. I hope you found inspiration and valuable insights to support your journey towards better health and happiness. Remember, each health journey is unique. This podcast is not medical advice, and it's essential to consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes. If you'd like to schedule a complimentary consultation with me, I would love to talk with you. Please go to drrachelyeager.com/schedule.